Hello there, and thank you for watching our video today. I'm Laura Dougal, and this is my colleague Sarah Turner, and we're both maternity return coaches. Last year, we started to put together a series of videos for you talking about the journey from having a baby and pre-having a baby to your return to work and beyond. And now we've realised that so many topics came out of those conversations that we're looking at for the next sort of 12 months, putting together a video series once a month, focusing on a topic that we think is important within that journey. Today, we're going to be looking at the topic of loneliness in motherhood. And the reason that we think this is really important is because, you know, as coaches, these are the kind of things that we hear people come to coaching sessions thinking about, that are on their mind, the impact that loneliness has on you as a new parent. And then as we've talked about it, Sarah and I have realised that actually, yeah, we felt a lot of loneliness as well at some stages. So given that we're very sociable people, probably more towards a sort of extroversion scale, if you like, and that we felt that, we're sort of wondering, oh, okay, maybe this is bigger than we even think it is now. So it's worth spending some time thinking about and looking at. So what we're going to do today is think about why loneliness is more common than you might think. We're going to think about some of the things that we wish we'd known, that we could have put into practice, that we're now in a position to be able to share with our clients and with you in this video. And then we're going to take a quick look at how coaching can support you within that as well.
No, that's great. And I think that the realization for both of us is, is that actually using the word loneliness in itself can be quite challenging. And it does, I think, for some at least, hold a bit of a stigma. And I know that when we were talking about it, in particular, I remember you sort of saying, gosh, God, it's really good to hear you say you felt the same. And I think so often we do think that we're the only ones feeling this way. And that makes it harder to kind of A, know that maybe we're struggling, and B, ask or reach out for help. So I think just that point about it being a stigma and maybe not a particularly useful or accessible word, because it feels a bit, oh, am I really lonely? And I think we talked about this, and I'm not sure that we necessarily would have known at the time that we were lonely. It's looking back now, we go, yeah, I think that was loneliness.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the biggest things that stops this being a conversation, because people I don't like to admit that I feel at times lonely, but I think it's a very human experience to feel lonely. I think, if you can really put your hand up and say, I have never once in my life felt lonely ever, that'd be quite unusual, wouldn't it? So I think even just that, of saying it out loud and recognizing that it is just part of the human experience. And if you think of it in that way, like on a scale, so that at one end there is like severe isolation and loneliness, and at the other end it might be like, oh, I just felt a bit out there on my own today, or whatever that might be, and knowing that that might be different for all of us, and we all have different interpretations of it as well. But yeah, I absolutely agree that there's something really helpful in just acknowledging that it's something that we probably all have experienced in our lives. And then that leads us on to that sort of, what are we calling it?
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting, and I know that I found this myself, and I also notice it in my maternity coaching clients particularly, is you don't know what you don't know. So when you're building up to go on maternity leave, you don't really know what maternity leave is going to be like. So in terms of expectations, it's quite hard to kind of have a feel for that. And I was sharing with you, I had this long list of all these things I was going to do, because I thought I was going to have all this free time, and of course I didn't. But there's so much change that you go through, not just the adjustment to, leaving work, going through labor, those early days and weeks of just making sense of reality and how does this all work, but kind of, 6 months plus, for those of us who take a longer maternity leave. It's that lack of structure, when you're so used to having a sort of a regimented or a routine to your day, that goes out the window. And of course you can put a routine in place. We both talked about Gina Ford, but you can put a routine in place if that's your thing, if that works for you. But plenty of mums I know don't like a routine, that doesn't work for them. But then your days all blur. And I think that can be a real challenge when you're finding yourself at home with this living, breathing little bundle of gorgeousness that you've got to keep alive.
Yeah, which, as we've said, is can feel like a big responsibility, can't it? And that's, what you're talking about there is this sort of, it is more common than you think. And actually, when I know for me, like when I look back on it, and with the value of hindsight, being able to look at it and go like, oh yeah, of course I felt lonely. It's absolutely a reasonable response to, and what you've touched on there about just a change in routine, having to get up, go to the same place, that sort of purpose, having that structure, having that routine. And within that, it's likely that you will have a varying degree of interactions with people. There might be someone that you just, on your way to work, you might see your neighbour when you get into the car, and just have a hello and a good morning. You might see somebody at a coffee shop. You might, there's, some people that you don't know, but that are just people who, those micro interactions of feeling seen and acknowledged, and just like, oh yes, you're part of something, which actually, if you haven't felt that, might sound a bit strange, but when you strip that away, this is part of that feeling of loneliness, of sort of not having a purpose, not having a place to be, not having a routine, and therefore not having the interactions that come with that as well.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember this, but I remember it was a real achievement just to get out of the house. To have got myself showered and dressed, to have got baby sorted. It could easily be lunchtime before you've even got yourself out of the house in those early days. Of course, by that point, you're exhausted and you probably haven't had much sleep. And so then, the expectation may be that you're then trying to go to a church group or go to a swimming class or whatever it might be, and to try and make some friends because you want that connection. But of course, you're not at your best anyway. Your confidence has probably taken a bit of a hit. And then I know we talked about this, often you might go to a church play group or something, but it's really hard to infiltrate other groups or to strike up a conversation.
Yeah. And also the opposite of that, where you might find a connection with somebody, and then because of just the nature of, like you're saying, what you've gone through, this is a big amount of change for anybody to go through. Even just giving birth is like a huge thing to go through, and then thinking about all the changes within your family dynamic, within work, all of that. So I don't know about you, but I definitely have had those sort of connections with people where we don't even know each other's names, and we're like sharing very like our deepest, darkest thoughts. So it's kind of, you go to the other extreme of either not talking to anybody, or the connections are like too fast, too soon. There's that really nice cartoon that I've seen on social media of two women at a baby group talking about, very intimate parts of giving birth, and then saying, okay, sorry, what was your name? I'll see you next week, which just really rang true for me. So it's like, yeah, appropriateness of the connection that you're having as well. And because you are processing a lot, I think, at that time.
Yeah. And of course, your friendships outside of having a baby, friendships from school or from other workplaces, they may not be at the same stage as you. And so those friendships often go through a bit of change as well, because you just haven't got that shared experience. And so I wonder whether it's worth us thinking a bit about what we wish we'd known.
Yeah.
Hindsight, which is always a good thing. I mean, for me, I've already mentioned it, but I think just knowing I wasn't the only one who was feeling that way.
Yeah.
It's more common than you might think, and just you and I sharing it, even for me 15 years on, for you a bit less, but just going, oh yeah, it wasn't just me.
Definitely. And I think there's that bit of that can be quite difficult, because people don't like to admit that they're lonely, because for all the reasons that you said earlier about this word lonely has got a real stigma. So there's two things within that. The first is like not having those close friendships where you're able to be vulnerable and say that you're feeling lonely. And also the thing about social media, where you're looking at lots of other people who are not lonely or don't appear to be lonely. I would question that. And that comparison piece of like, oh, I'm feeling like this, they're feeling like it's so much better for them. And I think we've said that's a whole other video that we're going to do, but that feeling of comparing to other people and how that can exacerbate the feeling of loneliness. Because you're looking at other people who appear to be sort of living the dream. But just touching on this, sort of calling it like this, it's a stigma because we use this word lonely, And that might have all kinds of connotations for each of us. Like I've shared with you, you know, my feeling about being lonely is like a real worry about, I'm isolated. I can hear it in myself. I'm just gasping for breath almost. It's like I'm flashing forward. I am a lonely person. I will die alone. And it's like, I wish I'd known that I could just scale that back and understand that loneliness really, truly is a feeling that is generated by our bodies as a call for something that we don't have. So it's a need that's being unmet, and that need in loneliness's case is connection. So I just need some connection, you know. And then once you sort of know that and accept that, then you can do the bits about like, what does connection look like for me, and what do I get from connection? Why do I need connection? You know, and it might be that today I'm just going to get some superficial connection. I'm just going to go to a group and be there, and that will be enough.
Or I'm going to go and get a coffee and a muffin and say hi to the person at the counter. You know, it can be the small things, and it can be the bigger things. And I love that. It's almost moving from loneliness to connection. And again, sort of thinking about what I wish I'd known. I think that thinking about how I can stay connected to systems or groups that maybe I was part of before I became a mum. So, you know, that might be if I was part of a choir, or if I was part of a book club, or whatever it might be. If I'm able to maintain that connection in some way, that kind of reminds me that I'm still me. And, you know, despite being a mum, there's still part of me there. And I think also this speaks to things like keeping in touch days and how useful they can be at reminding you that there is a role, that you do have a purpose, that you do have a team of people. And as a line manager, if you've got any line managers listening, just, you know, checking in and saying, hi, how are you doing? And thinking about how do we keep in touch with you whilst you're out, and let you know that you're missed, that you're valued, and that you belong. Even though you might not physically be here, you're still part of our team.
Yeah, I think that's a really, again, I think that's probably a video that we'll do another time about line managers and approaching these kind of conversations, which might feel emotional and difficult to have. But yeah, I think that's something we should touch on in the future. What you said there about making things easy as possible for yourself before you might be in the grip of loneliness, because knowing that it's really hard when you're in that moment, to be kind to yourself and to do all of this work around what is, you know, like you say, we're having this conversation, for me, like 7-8 years on, you 15, you know, this is hindsight that we're able to then like make sense of this. So I guess if you are listening, you know, to this video, you may not feel lonely, but just keeping in mind that, oh, okay, that's something to bear in mind. And what might I do now to be kind to myself, to make it easier for myself in the future, so that, you know, I might not get into this position of feeling that stigma of being alone.
Yeah. And I guess as we draw the video to a close, you know, thinking about coaching, the work that we both do, both in the kind of the return to work or the parent coaching, is, you know, a coaching session could be a really valuable way of being able to be vulnerable with your coach and say, actually, I'm feeling a bit low. I'm finding this quite hard. I feel like it's all on my shoulders. And you know, you and I might pick up on that and go, oh, okay, well, let's have a little think about what you need, what's missing. And it might be about connection. So what might be some ways in which you can build those connections? And, you know, one of the things I think is really important here is, you know, often the connections you make at this point are not going to be lifelong buddies. They may well be, but they may also just be companions for that journey. You know, I definitely had a couple of people I can think of who were so super important to me at that time. Am I deeply in touch with them now? No, I mean, at a distance we are, but they know who they are, and they were very, very important to me at that time. So it's just thinking they might not be direct, you know, might not be deep friendships, but they are companions, and actually that's that connection piece.
Oh yeah, I think that's yeah, so important. The expectation that we place on these connections as well. And I think that's it for me in coaching, is once you've done the stuff around like unpacking, like, oh, what is this feeling that I'm calling lonely? Actually, it's about X, Y, and Z, because it will be completely different for all of us. Coming up with your like plan for how can I get more of that in my life, and accepting that, yeah, if you're trying to fill something over here with something over here that doesn't fit, you know, like doing all of that work with a coach to figure out like what is the need that I have at the moment, and what's the best way that I can fill that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Should we wrap things up there?
Yeah, so thank you very much for watching. We hope that's been useful for you and that you'll relate to some of the things that we've said. If you have got any questions, or if you sort of like more information about how you might work with a coach, or information about some of the things that we do, then please feel free to either pop a comment below, or we'll put in the description ways to get in touch with both of us. And also, do you want to say, Sarah, about we're going to be carrying on?
Yes, yeah. So we're going to be doing a number of different videos this year. We're planning that at the moment. So if you've got any suggestions or things you'd like to hear about, please do let us know, and we'll do our very best to incorporate those as well. So keep an eye out. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.